Howdy, and welcome to the F1 Hatchet, and welcome to my post-race reaction for the Qatar or Lusail GP race. First of all, I would like to apologize for not having a video for the sprint race. Something came up and I was unable to get to it in a timely manner, and I figured since it wasn't that exciting, I would just skip it as we had a nice GP race today. So what was your thoughts on this GP race? Did you find it exciting? I didn't quite know what to think of it, actually. I thought it was kind of interesting. We had that first, lap incident, and then we had a kind of a boring section. Then we had the mirror coming off and causing all kinds of chaos, midway to a little bit over midway through the race. And then we had some strange penalties going on that were seemed to be way over the top for what we've seen in the past. And so things just kind of weirded out for me, I guess you could say. It wasn't quite the race I was hoping for. It wasn't quite the race I was looking for. I thought it was interesting. I thought it had some elements in there. It had some pit strategies going on slightly, but then we had the big pit stop that people were coming in for that broken mirror that kind of got shattered all over the front straightaway. So that kind of led up some of that aspect of it. Whereas before it was kind of building, trying to figure out where we're going, seeing if Lando could actually overtake Max and if anybody else could kind of catch up to them, and how that constructor battle was going to end up between McLaren and Ferrari. But then some of that got taken away with those big penalties, with George Russell getting the penalty for not following the safety car very fast, and you had Lando having that stop 10-second penalty that was kind of way over the top, as well as, Hamilton's drive, through penalty as well. So there's kind of these weird mixes in there that kind of caused some confusion and kind of made things a little bit more, off-putting, I would say, than anything else. Distracted from the race that it was there. It was going to be a decent race, I think. It wasn't going to be a great race. Probably an average race. We had some good battles from the midfield, and then we had that little battle up the front. So overall, I would probably give it maybe a 6 out of 10. But with all the confusion, it kind of drops down the ranking, at least initially for me. I'll have to wait and see if that changes over time or if that's just what I feel right now. So without further ado, I will go from the back of the grid to the front of the grid, telling you what I think of each driver and if I know what happened to them as well. So we will see here in the back of the pack, we have Esteban Ocon, who qualified in 20th and ended up in 20th. And we had Franco Colapinto, who's qualified in 19th and ended up in 19th. Now, these were one of the first incidences on track on that first corner where actually Nico Hulkenberg was on those hard tires to start off with and kind of lost those back and kind of ran into the back of Esteban, who pushed himself off into Colapinto, basically killing those two drivers' chances to move forward. So they didn't get to go very far, didn't get to see what they could do in this race, and that was kind of disappointing. And Nico didn't get a little penalty for that, as it was the first lap, I think, in regard from what I've seen. So that was kind of an odd mix there. So what happened to Lance Stroll? Well, Lance Stroll was kind of in a mix with Alex Albon, and he got a 10-second penalty for causing a collision for that. And he was thinking that there was something else wrong, so he, pitted, got some hard tires on, and then went to lap 7, and basically retired it after that. But there's something kind of off on that Aston Martin, probably due to that collision that he had. Now we come to Sergio Perez, who qualified in 9th and was doing decently. Ended up in 17th as he was coming back from one of the restarts in that safety car period. And that was the weird thing to me. He kind of ran around and spun. He said that those hard tires mixed with some weird engine inputs that he claimed to, kind of overpowered it, spun the car around what he wasn't expecting it to, and then lost the engine because he wasn't ready for that spin. So he just kind of killed the car and then wasn't able to get it going again. So that killed his day. So that was just a weird thing on his front. So kind of a weird move for him, weird position. I think this just puts that much more pressure that he's going to get removed at some point before next season, and they'll have someone else in that seat at the Red Bull. Now, whether he gets to go to the RBs or not, I do not know. But there's just mounting more pressure and more desire because he's failing on the qualifying sessions. He's not living up to it on most of these races. They just need to get someone else that can. I'm not sure if it's the pressure that's on him or what, but something needs to be changed for Perez to actually succeed, and that's not happening. So, unfortunately for him, he drops out of the race in 17th. Nico Hülkenberg had an okay race, I would guess. Qualified in 18th and ended up in 16th. He did have an issue with that very first lap that he came in and changed from tires on, went to another set of hard tires, went to lap 31 before switching to a set of mediums. He did have that contact with Ocon in that mix. We're at the very beginning of the race, which probably caused some of that confusion in that flat tire. Then he basically went around and ended up having to retire that car on around lap 40 as he spun off and got stuck in the gravel with those set of medium tires and just kind of like overspun it. So I'm not sure if everything was up to par on that Haas at that point in time. He wasn't really feeling it this weekend. He was trying to get back up into the decent area of the grid, but was not able to maintain that position. And when that spun off and got stuck, he just ended up having to retire that car. Alexander Albon started the GP in 16th and ended up in 15th. I have him getting hit by Stroll at the very beginning. I did pass K-Mag earlier on, and then he got hit by K-Mag around lap 45 that he ended up having some contact with, and it was deemed to be Alex Albon's fault. We got another 10-second penalty for him, so he had to come into the pits and drop out of the race, trying to switch to that second set of softs. So he went to lap 35 on a set of mediums. Like most people started off at mediums. Only one person started off on hards, and that was Nico Hülkenberg. The rest of everybody started off on medium, so he went to Alex Albon started off on mediums, went to lap 35 before switching to a set of softs, then switched to another set of softs on lap 55 to try to get that extra length in there, which didn't turn out very well because he had that 10-second penalty, which dropped him back into the clutches of the back of the pack. So not a good day for Williams altogether. Hopefully they can recover for the last race of the season next week. Then we have the RBs. We have Liam Lawson, who started the race in 17th and ended up in 14th. I have him gaining 3 spots at the very beginning of the race, which was good to see for Liam Lawson, but then kind of lost some of those positions as well. I have him going through and passing on lap 43 for that 13th position. I have him passing Hamilton in that run. So decent run for all of that. Gaining a 10-second penalty for causing a collision in that area. So dropped him into that clutches. Start off a medium, switch to hards on lap 35, then switch to softs on lap 36. And then made it all the way to lap 40 before switching to another set of softs for Liam Lawson. And that kind of penalty kind of caused his day in this run. Yuki was another one that started off really good, but then ended up not as well. I think that RB was not quite where it needed to be in the running overall in this race. It had pretty good, qualifying positions. So he started the race in 14th and made it to 13th, just one place up, but he was up way farther up in the grid to start off with. He did gain 4 places at the very start of the race, which was excellent to see. And then basically kind of lost positions from there. He went to lap 35 before switching to a set of hards. Lap 36, he switched to another set of hards. And lap 40, he switched to that set of softs. So kind of ended that race. Not quite the performance the RBs was looking for. You can see where Yuki just got up there at that very beginning, making up those positions, and then couldn't hold him. He was trying to defend as much as possible, but getting passed quite a bit, dropping back out of the point range. So unfortunately for RB, they didn't put the pressure on for the constructor standings. That kind of came up to the Haas's and the Alpines. Lewis Hamilton had a horrible day. After qualifying in 6th and ended up in 12th. He lost 3 positions at the very start of the, GP race. On that very first lap, he lost 3 positions. Had a 5-second penalty for a false start, which pushed him back farther. Had a puncture due to that mirror that I was talking about that made him go around pretty much the whole lap before coming back in. And then basically wanted to retire the car at that point in time. But then he had a passed Tsunoda on lap 45 for that 13th position, and then basically drove through the pit lane and had a pit lane speeding penalty as well. And then that basically said, okay, we're just going to retire the car. Basically went around on one more lap and then retired the car for him. Just shy of truly finishing the race, but they even though he got qualified as finishing the race in this run. So I went to lap 34 on a set of mediums before switching to a set of hards and basically went the rest of the way. Then we have Valtteri Bottas, which was looking so good for another set of points for Stake F1, but then kind of was getting caught up in those little incidences left and right, which kind of kept getting him pushed back into the field, not able to really gain that clutches. Almost had it into 10th before Lando came back through the field after his penalty and overtook him for that 10th position. So he started off in 13th and ended up in 11th. I have him passing Tsunoda on lap 20 for 13th. Then he came around at that end spot, had that mirror that was out on the front straightaway that he was trying to get close, and then ended up pulling out and hitting that mirror, just shattering that mirror all over that straightaway. I'm surprised I didn't actually have a safety car or some other method before that to actually pick up that debris. But unfortunately, he hit that, which caused probably that little bit of damage to his car as well. But then during that aspect, caused all the confusion on track. Then he basically passed Hamilton on lap 43 for 12th and passed Albon on lap 53 for 10th. So he got up into that 10th to last point position. And then he got passed by Lando, unfortunately, pushing him just outside of points. And I said he was kind of getting caught up in some of those incidences ahead of him, like Ocon and them. He was going to get pushed out. He was going to get pushed out as well on some, trying to avoid those, incidences, but losing a lot of ground because of that. And so he kind of kept him in the back of the field where he couldn't really advance as far as he should have. But overall, I think he did a decent job. I think the incidences and circumstances didn't lean towards him gaining points this round. So hopefully they can come back next week and basically show what they can do in that Stake F1, as they seem to make a fairly good, decent progress the last couple of races for them. That ends the bottom half of this race. So now we get to the top. So where we have Lando Norris, who started the race in 3rd, but ended up in 10th. He did get the fastest lap overall, so he gained that extra point. So he gained 2 points instead of the 1, but still that's a small, victory over what happened during this race. He did gain 1 position at the very start of the race, overtaking George for the 2nd position. And then basically he had that stop and go penalty because he was sped. Well, he didn't let up on that yellow incident that came across in that front straightaway because of the mirror that went away for some weird reason later. But he got called out for that and had a 10-second stop and go penalty, and he had already stopped for his pit stop. And so that basically added another 30 seconds to him, dropping him back to the back of the field where he was running really close to Max earlier. So he had to go to the back of the field and work his way back up from the back of the field up to 10th. So I have him basically passing Lawson on lap 51 for 13th, passing Tsunoda on lap 52 for 12th, passing Albon on lap 53 for 11th, and passing Bottas on lap 54 for that final 10th position, gaining him the point. So overall, he did a really good job, I think, except for that silly mistake of not letting up any kind of ability on that front straightaway when their yellow came out. It was his fault. I totally agree that it's his fault. I think it was, he had some penalty going, so he probably wouldn't have had that pressure on Max. But again, I don't think it was the whole 10-second stop and go, adding basically 30 seconds to his race overall penalty worthy of that incident. So that basically pushed him out. So I think, and a couple of other people were thinking that the same thing because of these really harsh penalties that were coming out at this race that really haven't seen those kind of penalties before. So the FIA is going to have to really talk about that and say why they changed that, the penalty rating system. I think they should have maybe gotten a 5 or even a 10-second penalty, but not the stop and go. Would have, still pushed them back in the ranking, but still given them a better thought and a better chance for that minor incident, I thought, during this race. Even though a yellow flag is a serious incident based on just yellow flag, and I think that's why they did it. Unfortunately, we've seen some in the past that were not quite as severe. And so I really think that's the cause of the confusion, is it didn't seem to be consistent throughout the year. If they had basically stated, at the new year or at some point that we were going to really crack down on these things, then it would have been different. But since there's not that incident, it really hurt Lando's position. He did a decent race going to lap 35 on a set of mediums, as I said, before switching to a set of hards that he then went to lap 45 with, where he had to do another run. So it really caused him that potential race win, which I don't think he would have gotten the race win, but still that second position. And if he had have, not let up, if he had let up and not had that incident, he could have stayed in that second position. Otherwise, he would have maybe dropped down to, 5th or 6th, which is still not the greatest, but it's still a lot of more points than that 10th position that he ended up. Kevin Magnussen had a really good day, starting in 10th and ended up in 9th. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough points for keeping Haas in that constructors battle for 6th, so they've lost that 6th position in the constructors standings, but still good to see him getting 2 points overall. He had a interesting race in general, fighting like normal K-Mag style around this track. He did lose 1 position at the very beginning of the race, and then he basically passed Albon on lap 6 for 10th, passed Tsunoda on lap 10 for 9th, passed Bottas on lap 29 for 16th, and then passed Albon again on lap 49 for that 9th position, and then ended up in that 10th overall. So, or it's on the 9th place overall. So that was a really good run for Kevin Magnussen, showing what he can do in that Haas. Really good effort for him, as his waning days in F1 probably are going to end up this year. So I don't think he's going to make it in any kind of position for next year, any kind of reserve role or anything to that effect. So we'll miss him next year, but really good to see him having another good drive at the end of his season, showing what he can do. Wan Yuzhou had an excellent drive, started the race in 12th, ended up in 8th. Basically, he had a kind of a dull race to the most part in this running. I basically have him passing Tsunoda on lap 15 for that 12th position, and basically was kind of in that pack, just at that edge between them, not really too close, not too far away, trying to have to keep that battle going in the defensive, but not having a lot of true action of passing on this, unless I missed quite a bit of it, which is possible. But I have him basically making it to lap 35 on a set of mediums before switching to a set of hards, and basically taking that set of hards the rest of the way. So a really good job for Wan Yuzhou, showing what he can do, and it's one of his final days in F1. I hear rumors that he might be making it as a reserve driver for someone else, but we'll have to wait and see with the final official confirmation on that run. He did get driver of the day, as we could see. I do agree with that in the sense that he made it in that stake F1 car, actually getting points for that constructors, which hasn't gotten points all year. So in the last 2 races, actually getting points means a lot. Otherwise, I'd probably have to give it to Max, coming back from that second position and keeping that first position, not an easy spot. So I would have probably given it to Max if it wasn't Juan Yu Zhou. This gives us to 8th position. Fernando Alonso had another good race, finally, in that Aston Martin. I know he's been struggling lately. I know he's, complaining on the radio about the front, line speed in those straightaways on that Aston Martin, having really issues for 2 years running. So hopefully when they switch, manufacturers on their engines, they can kind of resolve that issue next year. But so far, right now, they're struggling a little bit in this back half of this run. But anyway, a good run for him. Qualified in 8th and ended up in 7th. I have him passing K-Mag on lap 5 for 11th, passing Tsunoda on lap 14 for 11th, and then passing K-Mag in the pit lane. So he just got out at the edge of K-Mag, and that was an interesting run as he was on the inside and K-Mag was on the outside and making it by him by the end of the pit row. So I'm not sure if anything was going to come of that, but I thought that was interesting. He did make it to lap 35 on a set of mediums before switching to a set of hards, who then switched back to a set of mediums during that lap 36 incident, and then worked the rest of the way on that set of mediums. Carlos Sainz had that puncture, but ended up qualifying in 7th and ended up in 6th. He was fairly decent up there at the run on the front until that puncture that basically dropped him back into that 6th position as he had to come in and get that second set of tires on. So I have him basically gaining a position at the very beginning of the race, and then making it to lap 34 on a set of mediums before switching to a set of hards, and then having to get that puncture and having to come in and really replace that due to that mirror shattering on that straightaway, which caused him to, have a not quite in sync pit stop that dropped him back a little bit in that running. But overall, a really good run for Carlos. I think he was doing decently before that puncture. I liked the way he was up. He was up there in the front, running positions, not quite where he wanted to be, but not farther back in the pack like we've seen in the past occasionally. So the Ferraris were kind of in the mix there. So we have Pierre Gasly, who was the other person that did an excellent job, qualified in 11th and made it all the way up to 5th in that Alpine. We've seen that Alpine just really come alive these last few races and really putting pressure even on the front runners in this last couple of races, which is really good to see them having some fun in that run. So Pierre Gasly, I have him losing a spot at the very beginning of the race, but was able to pass Alonso on lap 6 for 11th, pass Tsunoda on lap 13 for 10th, and then passed Sainz on lap 40 for that 6th position. He went to lap 35 on a set of mediums before switching to a set of hards, then switched basically in that mayhem on around lap 36 and lap 35 error. So he kind of made out with that pit stop, kind of in line with everybody else that gave him that extra boost in there to keep him in that running in that 5th position where he was able to hold off George Russell, among other things, who was right on his tail near the end. Then we have George Russell, who was qualified in 1st and ended up in 4th. Not the really day that he was looking for, but a decent run from him. He did lose 2 positions at the very beginning of the race when Max and Lando were able to pass him on that first stint. But then after that, he kind of made it into that 3rd position, kind of steady, running around. I know they was struggling a little bit more in that Mercedes than they were hoping for, as the practice sessions in the sprint race they were really good on. The qualifying they did really good on as well. So they kind of somehow during the GP race time kind of had some issues in the sense of the track changing or the temperature changing, getting that car a little out of whack. But he managed to maintain that car around this track in that front few spots. So that was really good to see for George Russell. Unfortunately, he dropped down to 4th. Overall, I do have him passing Alonso on lap 35 for 9th. He did pit a little earlier, trying to resolve that. So he made it on to 23 laps on that set of mediums before switching to a set of hards, switching to another set of hards, which he complained about on lap 35. And it's like, why didn't we go to a mediums? Because I think he liked the set of mediums better than the set of hards, but he ended up making the rest of the lap on, or race on, that set of hards. Keeping that, fourth position, putting pressure on Oscar to some degree, keeping Pierre Gasly behind him in that running as well. So a decent job for George Russell in that kind of mishap Mercedes balanced vehicle that we kind of heard on the radio for Lewis Hamilton, saying it's kind of a misbalanced machine. It wasn't quite balanced correctly for this race. Let's see, just Oscar, who qualified in fourth and ended up in third. He did lose his position at the start of the race as well, but was able to pass Leclerc on lap 5 for fourth, and then basically maintained that position till Lando basically dropped out behind him, pushing him up to that third position. He passed Leclerc on lap 5 for that fourth position, and he went to lap 34 on a set of mediums before switching to a set of hards in this run, and then went to the rest of the way on that set of hards through that mayhem. So a decent run for him, keeping it in that mix. Always seemed to be doing fairly decently at this race for Oscar Piastri, so we'll have to see how that plays out in the future. And then we have Charles Leclerc, who qualified in fifth and ended up on the podium in second. Very kind of unexpected for him. He did gain a spot at the very beginning of the race, went to lap 35 on a set of mediums, and then switched to a set of hards. During that run, didn't really have any true action on track, just trying to keep that pace behind Lando. Basically in that third position, not really putting pressure on Lando as far as I could see, but was able to keep it in that fairly comfortably in that third position for the most part until Lando got that penalty and then moved him up to that second position. Then of course we have Max Verstappen, the world champion, who got pushed back to that second position because of being slow on the qualifying run, not doing that, getting that weird penalty for him, dropping him back to second on the grid after making pole position, but it didn't matter. He was able to take that first position on that first corner from George in this run, and then basically maintain that throughout this race. Basically have him passing George on lap 1 for that first position. He did get that penalty from the start of the race. He gained that position at the first lap, so he gained one position that first lap, went to lap 35 on a set of mediums before switching to a set of hards, which he maintained the rest of the race. And as an example of how well he maintained this, it wasn't an easy battle from him and Lando, but it was a decent battle, but he was able to keep that lead fairly consistently. So on lap 5, basically right after that first safety car pulled in, he was 0.8 seconds ahead of Lando. At lap 10, he was 1.7 seconds ahead of Lando. At lap 15, he was 1.7 seconds ahead of Lando. At lap 25, he was 1.8 seconds ahead of Lando. Lap 40, he was 0.5 seconds ahead of Lando because of that second incident that occurred. And then, of course, Lando had to drop back out of that field because he had that stop and go penalty. And so that dropped him back to the back of the pack, away from Max's battle. So he ended the race on lap 57 with a 6-second lead ahead of Leclerc. So he ended up for the fairly comfortable lead at the very end, but overall it was a fairly decent battle between him and Lando, which I kind of missed due to that penalty that Lando received. Yes, it was his fault, as I said before, but I would have loved to see a battle out the rest of the way during this race, and we'll have to see how that plays out next week, as it's more of a Ferrari race, according to them. That track fits Ferrari more than McLaren, so we'll have to see how that battle plays out. If it's McLaren that's fighting Max, or if it's one of the Ferraris fighting Max, or if it's just the McLarens and the Ferraris fighting each other back farther in the field to see who comes out on top of the constructors' standings. Well, that gets us all the way through the grid. So now we will see what happens to the drivers' standings. So the drivers' championship, of course, we still have Max as the champion with now 429 points over Lando's 349 points. But we see Pierre Gasly jumping back up to that 11th position with 36 points over Yuki Tsunoda, his old teammate, dropping him back to that 12th position with just 30. We also see Wang Yuzhou jumping up to 20th position with 4 points, pushing Liam Lawson back to that 21st position. So that leaves Valtteri Bottas as the only current driver that is driving around this season left without points. Hopefully he will be able to get points this next race and have a race or have a season where no one has been 0 points left in the season. So hopefully we'll see some little action for Valtteri Bottas that will help out with that. That also leaves Logan Sargent as the 23rd driver standing for this season, being dropped out midway through this season as well for Franco. So that kind of covers the driver standing. Did this make any changes for the constructors? If I can get to stick on that page. So we still have McLaren as the lead here with 640, but Ferrari now has 619. So they still have a shot at making that championship for the constructors standing over McLaren. So they're going to have that big battle next week to see who actually comes out on top for the constructor standings. But we also see Alpine with Pierre Gasly's nice run to 5th overtake Haas back into that 6th position. So they now have 59 points over Haas's 54 points. And then we see Kick Sauber actually get 4 points, getting them out of that 0 marker. So that concludes, basically what happened this week. What happens next week is the Abu Dhabi or Yas Marina GP race. That'll happen on December 8th. It is a normal race, so we have a normal warm-up weekend. No sprint races as far as I'm aware of. So, and that was first introduced in 2009, and the lap record holder is Max Verstappen in 2021 with 1 minute 26.103 seconds. It'll have 58 laps being led for a length of 3.281 miles per lap for a total race distance of 190.253 miles. So until then, I will see you on the grid, and farewell.